Ethics, a novella about birds by Cisco, Part 1. Streaking over the earth, the songbird lifts itself up slightly and then, folding its wings, drops into a shallow swoop toward cover as a flash of lightning bursts and gutters, and then, virtually in the same moment, a thunderclap swats the bird to the ground. The bird's skull fractures with a crack that sets its jaw awry, and the pain and shock of crashing is doubled and redoubled with the searing, sugary torture of the split bone. The blasted bird lies turned onto its side, stunned in the tall grass, still dry, though whipped by the wind, which has begun to stink. Suffering is playing all around the bird, like that stinking wind. Suddenly, she sees the fire. The dream is in the light, the gold and scarlet color, the almost inaudible sound it makes, the impossibly nimble dance it's doing in place, and in the way it smells, as if the bird were hurtling up to meet it and only it, unmoored among all the other fixed things the bird can see. The noise of the fire is like the song of an unfamiliar type of familiar animal. There's a humming like a swarm of bees. There's snapping like twigs, rustling like dry leaves, but then none of these familiar noises are ever produced at once by the same thing, not in any organized way. The fire thing must have its own organization, which is the reason it sings in the way it does, using the most unusual things for its voice. The coloring is strange, because the noises have no associations whatever with bright things, like sparkling water running, but then the ocean also sparkles and it roars. Incandescent gold sparkled into ruby, and sullen, bloody scarlet, lacings of symmetrically tongued crimsons and carmines, luminously tawny and sun-glazed sand. The fire looms over her now, like a tree growing out of nothing. The stinking, coiling brilliance in front of her seems to want to poison and devour her senses like a swarm of vicious insects. But it is mysteriously contained in itself, even as it fights to hatch itself out of its own shape. The songbird stares in awe at the coilings of towering scarlet monster rearing itself out of nothing. No roots, nothing but grass and the level ground. Taking in its writhing shapelessness, it struggles within its bottomless shape, as if it were a huge poisoned animal convulsing and sick, vomiting itself. The fire, set by lightning, dancing inside its irregular footprint and throwing itself impetuously up. Now it channels itself along the length to heighten this leaf, standing bolt upright out of its spiny, whirling mass. Well, now that leaf shrinks back down and becomes a spine, while the fire, both the whole thing and a sort of darting shootingness inside it, transfers its upward groping along an adjacent limb. She stares with horror at the beaded lashings sliding along the dry stalks of the grass only inches away from her. She struggles, her skull flaring and crackling with every movement, her head heavy and ungainly with pain, pulling her down to knock it against the ground and fan the flames inside Fracture's jagged edges. She watches helplessly as a feeble stick-like arm of the fire effortlessly encircles her. She is trapped inside the fire. She screams, stares, screams, stares. She has no balance, can't get her wings out to fly. Then, a chance contraction concentrates her will, lifting her under her feet. Just then, a lazy flirt of wind dashes a scrap of flame directly onto her, and she catches fire, the flames sucking greedily at her neck and face. Her right eye puckers, chars, goes out. The bird flails wildly, battering herself against the ground, all her muscles spasming. She flails into a cool patch of damp mud. The pain is so total that it almost forces her out of herself. Her right side is slathered with mud. The right side of her face and neck are smoking, but the flames are extinguished. With what remains of her sight, she turns to find the fire in order to escape from it, and sees that there is a brownish, hollow space among the flames, returning her gaze like an unexpected eye. This is reason, it says. Pain, terror, calling for help, heard by nobody. The bird feels inside herself the same manic raking of the wind and clouds, the same calculated frenzy of spreading and converting, burning, eating, growing, swelling, becoming greater and more terrible, battling back the extinguishing wind, the quenching water the clouds have started dropping down on it. The tranquil rage of the reason that is the fire's and hers. Some part of the world has gone wild, but it all makes sense, flapping in this corner of the grass. Fire rings the damp patch Chance tossed her into. Between her and the flames, there are the same uncanny thermal tremblings that the terrible gulls use to climb into the sky every day. Smaller, more tumultuous. Seeing them, her pain immediately opens her wings. She teeters, and her pain widens her stance, spreads her wings. A wider target for the fire, but her pain feels beneath her wings and tumbling of hot air, agitated by the fire. Her pain leaps, flapping only twice, and then reaching desperately for the jets of smoke bursting from the tips of the flames. They boil up, scalding her body. She inverts and is tossed through the air, tumbling up the rising fire breath like a dead leaf. The wind shears across her path, and her wings open. Down the wind's long, cooling ramp she skates, overshooting the toothed, golden extremity of the fire. She slaloms toward a copse of trees, like streaks of icy blackness, the opposites of the flames. For her, to spot a branch is to reach for it, and though she can only see through her left eye, she is able to home in on a long, slender branch and snatch a perch of it, all her speed gone. When the fire flicked out its tongue at her and burned her, she thought she heard it telling her, "This is reason." The scourges of the fire flog at the ground, the wind, the grass, the air, the clouds, saying, "This is reason," flatly. The passion of the flames is beneath something higher in the flames, coolly thinking, ardently doing what must be done, what only can be done. A guttering, lunar pulsation of light snaps across the gloom, whipping in space above the grass. Another songbird streaks into a clump of bushes. Almost at once comes the deafening sound, a rattling, clapping report that bursts on the remit of the already vanished light like an ancient and enormous tree trunk sprung out from the flash, toppling down, creaking and groaning. Like the crash of a fallen tree in the woods, the call of this disembodied explosion spreads through the trees, stretching and thinning, but reviving against stones and slopes. The trees soak up the noise and rend and sieve it through their branches, that still move too calmly. Holes like mouths, or eyes open and close, all over the fire. There is vacancy inside it, at once like the inside of an egg, and like the dark eye in a garishly feathered face. The flame spreads in a shattered canopy that bounces off the ground, swirls around itself, scurries into the grass, and countless snow-white snakes as the center bubbles and mushrooms red. The reeking belch that returns forces the songbird to turn, smarting away. Now, look at red angles that flap into dissolving black bulbs of smoke against the lividly seamed, overcast sky. Out of the howling of the fire comes a worldwide hush, as the heavy part of the rain rolls over. The water pours from the sky and beats down the red. Heavy droplets and spray kick up from wet grass. She watches the rain batten on the fire, clubbing it down. The fire blackens, hemorrhages white steam, as the rain serenely tramples it into the charred excrement of burned grass and scorched dirt at its base. It's like seeing a huge tree rot away to nothing before her eyes, as if that obscenity had been nothing more than mist. Where did it come from? Where did it go? Now the rain is pelting down. The last thing her right eye ever saw had been a wavering blur of blonde light whose touch was distilled pain that tugged and dabbed at her. Compressed down into her feet, her dizzy head splitting, she splutters and coughs up what little food she has in her stomach. A heavy raindrop smashes her in the head and nearly knocks her from her perch. She inches her way toward the sluicing trunk, fixes herself, goes completely still, afraid to make any movement at all for fear of aggravating the terrifying, persisting torment that's fastened on her and that only grows fiercer, causing her to shrink into herself even further. Hunger and fatigue are starting to work on her, but this pain overrules them and her, keeping her nailed to the spot, motionless. She thinks over and over of her eggs, not knowing what this means exactly. Her mate will look after the eggs. Sees the nest untended, filling with rain, her eggs drowning in icy rainwater. To return to the nest, she will have to cross the open spaces, exposed to hawks and falcons, who have only to see her, to kill her. Wings beat the air like drums. The wing beat is a solid thump, and the outstretch is a sharp rap, and spreading into the glide is a quiet crash. She imagines the cuckoo flitting up to her untended nest, which induces despair, which throws her in the air. Though it feels like she's ripping her skull, she drags herself up into the air again and again, plunging down in darting swings, driven toward the ground by the rain, and forced to flap her wings violently to stay aloft, straining with all her will through her one eye to reach the next clump of covering trees, but she falters, shifts her vision lock to a big solitary bush well away from the trees. Clumsily, she collides with its yielding branches and finds a purchase on a twig with one foot, everything in her head yawing violently back and forth. Now she stands on the twig, dripping rainwater. She drinks a little, sickening and cool. It sits inside her without mixing into her substance at all, and in a moment she coughs it back out again. She will have to work her wings a great deal to get up from down here. Nearly beaten down to the ground by the rain and wind, flapping crazily, she gets up into the air and careens into the cover of the clump of trees, into a gloom composed of vertical strips of blue, gray, and brown hazes, deepening into damp indigo, cold lead, saturated umber. The next open space is so wide she has to cross it in 3 flights, stopping on the ground. Once she's safely under the cover, the woods, exhausted, she sits half buried in leaves, calling. A single, clear cry, over and over, dropping quickly at the end each time, like a statement. Somehow she makes her way to the tree where her nest is hidden, feeble, clumsy flights, dazed, stumbling. One side of her head seems to be tearing off, excruciatingly slowly. She sits at the base of the tree for a long time, unable to gather the strength to fly up to the nest, but then she does it, contracting and then exploding, clambering up the air to the nest and perching on it, trying to look at the 2 eggs sitting there. She settles herself on them. She sits on them, as still as if she were dead, and her cruel pain becomes not entirely all of her. Through the pain comes the fire's glorious memory, almost like a distinction of some kind bestowed especially on her. It throbs and trembles inside her like a blob of dew on a leaf, tumbling orange, incandescent copper, and vermilion, explaining to her with godlike patience that it is the reason that the world resounds with in a never-ending recitation and elaboration of the ethics, which cannot be heard in the same way as she would hear a sound, but which sounds in all sounds, is shown in all sights, is present at all times in all things and actions, through the stillest night time like a murmur of water just below the topsoil, but for all that in accents so powerful they turn the silence into something emphatic that does not so much shock the world as create it complete, all at once, like the burst of lightning throws a whole landscape at the eye at once. In her delirium, she thinks the ethics bellows in the brightest and most raucous daylight, screams in the tumult of stormy wind, tickles heavy boulders and sways their bases, so that the scrape and parting of one crumb of earth from another happens just as one proposition flows another, according to the definitions and axioms. The mind is capable of perceiving a great number of things, and is so in proportion as its body is capable of receiving a great number of impressions. Her body is receiving intolerable, lustrous pain that cries out for something she can't provide, relief or action, something, but she has to sit on her eggs. She must to sit still, or else half her head will scrape off along a white-hot fissure, and its shards will drop like bits of eggshell to scatter among the roots below. Under the direction of her delirium, she begins with the definitions. 1. What hatches creates an echo, a kind of echo, beginning before singing, before there is a voice, and it is that which resonates already within the living egg. 2. Anything that is gestating is considered to be a living egg, that is, within a shell. To be gestating is preparation for singing, for any calling entity. For example, a body is considered to be finite, because we can always conceive of its hatching out into a new and still developing singer. So, too, a thought hatches another thought, but the singing body is thinking, and the song of thought starts out as a body. 3. Scintillation is that which is no longer itself, but which broods and hatches itself. That is, that the gestation of which requires the conception of another thing from which it has receded, like echoes of singing. 4. Thinking about scintillation is accompanied by phrasings. Drop to drop, the point, then distinction, the refinement of the mineral, the subtraction of, the division of, the joining of, note to note, and rest to rest, torment of steady work without motion, as the terms begin to knit, braided back into song from sound. 5. Mood is the kind of scintillation that is the particular way in which something hatches into something else. 6. Teemingness is the shadow, moonlight, or night remembrance of day, that is, the image of scintillation, consisting of any hatching which is free to compose and create echoes, to resonate without ending. 7. A thing that echoes in all directions and is expected to act by teeming is free. A thing is considered to be unhatched or unfledged if it exists and acts in a faltering and uncertain way. 8. Never-endingness is expressed in the echo, and means scintillation itself, insofar as it is conceived as freely following solely from the regularity of a never-ending echo. The 8 definitions wander in and out of a dreamless, half-smothered sleep of phantasmal browns and oranges, cooled by the rushing sound of rain splashing in the branches, piloted by the mystery of healing that gushes through the fracture like lava channeled by rocky crags, down a night escarpment like a ribbon of liquid daylight. Will thoughts be guided? The 8 definitions have to hold still in order to keep the environment from throwing up again or tossing itself apart. Reason is guided against the sleep and the upright sides of the escarpment of thought in the channels that water the definitions. Shallow rain channels cut the air and then vanish. The rain pulses down arteries hung in space, and axioms are what mark the course that reason takes to re-water the clouds and cause the shower, the fullness of the downpour. The definitions scream for axioms. A nest of hatchlings screams for food. There is a screaming for food underneath the misery contracted into a trickling seam high in the trees. The axioms come in their own time, falling one by one into the hunger like water, which fills the stomach without satisfying the hunger. First axiom. All things hatch into the outside. The separation of stomach and food, the drastic separation of stomach and food, the separation of the bird from its clutch of eggs in order to put food each into the separated stomachs, is inevitable. First axiom. All things hatch into the outside. Second axiom. What cannot be hatched itself must be brooded. Third axiom. Hatching follows from brooding, and the chick follows from the egg, and the egg follows from the nest, and all things live this way. The effect is to continue to sit on the eggs. It is necessary to stop temporarily. In order to avoid being killed by vomiting, it is necessary to put something new in the stomach. In order to repair the broken bone and to heal the roasted skin and flesh, it is necessary to eat what these injuries will induce to be vomited, which entails moving, which will exacerbate these injuries and retard the healing. It is necessary to heal to end the suffering, but the suffering is healing. Fourth axiom. The knowledge of a brooding depends exclusively on the knowledge of a hatching. Fifth axiom. Only things which have nothing in common with each other can recede through each other. That is, the receding of the song does not involve the receding of the trees. The sounds heard through the shell have nothing in common with the egg. The cry for help recedes, unanswered, into the striped blue and indigo, gray and brown. The pink light stands empty among the trunks, and no help comes. The cry will never stop receding into a vacancy that grows ever greater to swallow it. The cry for help falls into the growling stomach of space. Sixth axiom. A true conception must hatch with any and all broodings. Seventh axiom. If an egg can be conceived as not hatching, then it is an echo rather than a song. The cry comes back at the same time that it recedes. The cry is not an answering promise of help. It is only the consciousness of suffering, its necessity made shining and unmistakable. There is no help. There has been some accident, a necessary one, and the songbird's mate is gone. The misery of healing, the eggs, the hunger, the definitions, the axioms, the listening, intensified now that she cannot see on the right side, the heartbeat, the calls of scrub jays, the calls of crows, the calls of grouse, the breathing, the long-riding whisper of the trees, the crash of surf in the distance, the plunks and hiccups of the stream, mumbling over rocks, the regular call of dogs, the meshed calls of other songbirds, the calls of mourning doves, the calls of snipes, the calling of crickets. Axioms guide definitions. Among them appear inexorable propositions, with a regularity that is supernally indifferent, seeming now as if they were being articulated out of the elements of a flexible, boundless rhythm that burns all around her, and above, and below, and inside, and seeming now as if they were out-shouting and burning through that rhythm. Apply the axioms to the definitions. In the pouring rain, in the frigid waterfall, the pulsation of the heart in that cold blue curtain. 1. Scintillation is by nature simultaneous with all hatchings. 2. Scintillation has nothing else in common with itself. 3. Only the layer can be the cause of the egg. That is, the layer and the egg are not the same, and this is necessary. The calls of the scrub jays, the pulsing of my heart. 4. 2 or more distinct chicks are distinguished from one another by their calls. 5. Scintillation can only exist in the landscape. 6. Scintillation can only be caused by what is not scintillation. 7. The echo belongs to the nature of scintillation. 8. Scintillation is free. 9. The more echo through the shell, the more it recedes. 10. The calls of crows, of grouse, my breathing, my heart pounding. Each hatching of scintillation must be conceived through its receding. 11. The echo of scintillation consisting of free phrasings is also free. 12. No phrasing of scintillation itself can be truly hatched, from which it would follow that scintillation consists only in more laying. 13. Free scintillation is never-ending recedingness of the mother's voice. Pounding, pounding, calling, the crashing of surf, the whisper of trees, droplets in trees, gasping for breath, breath to explain. 14. There can be, or be conceived, only other scintillations. 15. Whatever is, recedes, and nothing can be laid or hatched without receding. 16. From the freedom in the air, there must follow free travel in free ways, that is, everything that can be produced by a mother's voice, freely echoing. 17. Scintillation acts solely against the confines of its hatching, and hatches only to lay. 18. Resonation of the mother's voice through the shell is the transitive cause of all things. 19. Continue. 19. Scintillation is never-ending. That is, all of the phrasings of teemingness are never-endingly hatching. 20. The echo of teemingness and the hatchings of the newborns are one and the same. 21. All eggs that hatch from the absolute receding of teemingness have no mother. That is, through the receding they are free songs, the plunks and hiccups of the stream tumbling over rocks, the calls of the songbirds, my thrashing heart, my weary breathing. This is what is general, whatever. 22. Whatever follows from some phrasing of a mother exists freely, i.e. as an echo. 23. Every mother's song which exists freely and full-fledgedly must have freely followed either from the absolute nature of some phrasing of a song or from some phrasing modified by a modification, which is free and full-fledged. 24. Straining for air. 24. The essence of eggs laid by the singing of the mother invariably requires that they be beneath her body. 25. The echo through the shell is the efficient cause not only of the hatchling of things, but also of their avian phantomishness. The mourning doves, the snipes, the crickets and songbirds, my heartbeat, my choked breathing. 26. What acts as expected is expected by teemingness. Continue. 27. A thing which has been expected by teemingness to act in a particular way remains surprising. 28. Every individual thing must be under the body of its mother. 29. Everything is surprising, like the precise appearance of the newborn, but all things are from the free teeming of scintillation, surprising to recede, surprising to approach. The convulsing heart, the barking dogs, rain falls harder, breath coming shorter. The father's song is always surprising. 30. The finite voice in action must comprehend the phrasings of teemingness and the recedings of teemingness, as well as everything else. 31. The voice in singing or calling, whether hatched or no, must be related to the song singing, not to the song sung. 31. No. 2. 32. Song cannot be called a free cause, but only a surprising effect. The father is always willful. 33. Things could only have been hatched by teemingness in any other way or in any other order than is the case. 34. Is it 30? 34? 34. All songs are haunted by their very power. 35. Whatever we conceive to be within the song's power, the song will accomplish. 36. Nothing exists from whose receding a brooding does not follow. This is reason. The woods skirt low hills and roll with the land toward the ocean, breaking up into isolated copses on its way down into the open grass, softened and greened by fog. The air above the treetops whips in flashing sunny reversals of wind. The birds who fly that high are adept at turning right angles. As the day waxes, thermal columns rise perpendicularly from exposed patches of heated rock, turning them into the bases of huge pillars of roiling, air-buoyed gulls, kites, shearwaters, steadily aloft, screwing them into the boughs of the middle air. They soar well above the tops of the lawned hills, where oaks with heads of glittering froth and wandering trunks grow in isolation like wooden thermals, scaled by squirrels, beetles, ant columns, caterpillars. Bolted together by oak roots, the hills seem at once to grow and subside, just sitting there, as if they weren't folds of the landscape, but lumps from some sky pressing the earth like feet in bushy, green felt clogs. Far in back of them stand black mountains, still guanoed with snow and trapping the clouds in their flight inland from the scooting plovers of the shore. They rise and drive back the clouds toward the ocean, which keeps whipping up more spray, and the land in between buckles, sprouting blackhead trees from its pores, and cracking in gullies where white rivulets dart through a crease, and then splay out, tumbling into countless shallow reflecting pools, glimmering in divots set deep as jewels in scored black clay and bright green grass. all over the open ground, and in among the trees as well. These pools are cataracted eyes, pushed like glass fakes into the soil, with strawberries poking from their corners. A narrow strip of gray-brown sand, fringed with iron rocks, separates the thinning grassy slope from the endless blasts of dead green and white wind and seawater curling against and goading each other to slump down onto the flattened beach again and again, with roars. At dawn, everything down here is smeared with rose and violet. The shingle glows, and a gigantic spirit of color lifts out the rocks and water, rises in the air, and pulls all the other colors up, then splits and subsides further upward, above the highest flyers. The sun, for that day, flies straight toward the ocean, over it toward the shore, then flies past and disappears behind the mountains, never to return, but to be followed by another just like it. An endless one-way migration of strictly solitary flyers. No one can follow it any more. It must be where they go to die, shyly invisible behind that rock wall. The shore blanches as each sun drops toward the mountains, although now the sky is completely bare of clouds and uncanny with peach and powdery blue, like the inside of an eye whose iris is the ocean and whose pupil is the ground, all dirty, clogged with rocks and trees. The day dawns, and with the air change and the light shaftings, the songbirds have to respond with singing. The males show themselves and sing. This is reason. The air sluices through the trees, and at night it gathers itself together, and in the morning it slides gradually back into motion, contracting into tight points that clatter over the body like flakes of ice. The air off the water sounds with a heavy rumbling tone that carries a sense with it of diffuse warning, and from time to time, especially as it strikes the resonator of the woods, that tone becomes a continuous bass melody underscoring the motion of the leaves, branches, and litter with a doomed feeling. Even then, there is a lighter, celestial chord that sweeps in from space, almost chiming, exciting the ear sensually, at once caressing and rough, eerie and reassuring, like the distant conversing voices of cloud tops. While the wind that races down from night is like the freshets of a black overflow, clear and colorlessly dark, shoring up night's darkness, stirring it and distributing its countless fragrances along triangular courses. The smaller of the songbird's two chicks fell from the nest and died only days after he hatched. The remaining chick was large and vigorous and ate enough for two, so that, without her mate to help her, the songbird had to spend all day searching for food, from the moment his screams of hunger dragged her from sleep before dawn to final ebbing out of daylight. Her one good eye did not fail to notice the corpse of the other chick, crumpled and battered at the base of the tree, although she had not been present to witness the larger chick trampling it, then driving it furiously over the edge of the nest to fall to its death. With her altered vision, she didn't notice that her one remaining chick bore less and less resemblance to either her or her mate with every passing day, any more than she noticed the minor fungal infection purling the ruined socket of her right eye. The infection develops, the fractured skull knits, burned flesh scars over, the cuckoo chick burgeons, the songbird exhausts herself to feed it, while her dead chick melts into the ground. Axioms form and branch in lemmas, channel postulates like rain. Axiom 1. Bodies are either moving or not moving. Axiom 2. Moving bodies move at different speeds. Lemma 1. Bodies are told apart by their speeds, and by whether or not they move, and not in any other way. Lemma 2. This is true of all bodies. Lemma 3. Bodies are moved by each other. Postulates. First, bodies have parts. Second, some parts are hard, some soft, some wet, some dry, some are further inside than others. Third, bodies are vulnerable to other bodies. Fourth, bodies depend on other bodies. Fifth, when one body causes another body's fluids to press on the soft parts of the body, it changes that body's shape and leaves a mark. Sixth, bodies can act on, move, and displace other bodies. Listening for the moment to add her singing to the song all around her. Sing, turn head, listen. Watch. Not watching for anything, just watching. Listen, then, when the moment comes, sing. How do you know the moment has come? Because you sing. So the listening becomes singing while remaining listening. And when she stops singing, she's still singing because she's listening to sing again. So the moment comes, and she sings, but not because she has decided that the moment has come. There is no wrong moment. Very little remains of her past. She remembers a weary, familiar-smelling form that came and went, thrusting food down her throat, or gathering her and the others closer together, sharing the warmth and reassuring weight of a body, with the rain trickling down its sides, and she remembers singing, rising up in between the piercing cries for food. Those cries all around her had been maddening, at once goading her to raise her voice louder and louder until she was more weary from crying than from hunger, a kind of madness of a group, and at the same time those cries were not distinct from hers and formed a crowd she could safely lose herself in. A cacophony that strung her ears, so that it was a relief when the pitch began to drop, when vision and other senses developed around that howling orifice, and made it possible to become interested in other things, weakening her hearing as her other senses developed, multiplying her attention as well as dividing it, and a crazy-making sound, by turns depressing and infuriating. She'd had one especially large nestmate who had outbellowed all of them, and more than once had nearly kicked her up over the edge and out altogether, but she had struggled and even pecked until the message got through. Through that din, she had managed to catch, from time to time, the robust, lively, complicated song of a male, and it stirred up in her an appetite that was subtle and vague. The impulse was still shapeless. The only direction it knew was up, that is, toward awareness, a contour that could be known, as well as toward power to act. This curious line connected that singing to her body's transformation as she grew, fledged, began to fly. As a female bird, she would not be required to sing, but she still had to know the songs of the males. She didn't have to learn to sing those songs, but how to have those songs sung to her. If she hadn't known now, she would not have been able to satisfy the urge to breed and lay eggs that crystallized ever more distinctly in her. The male sings about his own body and everything he can do. His song gives you all of himself first, so your mate first exists for you as a song. Among all the endless singing, each is individual and plainly discernible from all the others, so a mistake in identifying singer and song is virtually unheard of. At the same time, the song declares nothing but itself. It is all the music there is, or there is none. It starts out complete, then unravels. It does not unfold in time. The song exists in time, but excuses both the singer and the listener from successive moments. The singing becomes a brief new world for the singer and the listener. The moment a female bird becomes a listener to a particular male's song, the selection has already been made, and the song is the music of that selection. On and on it goes, deepening the selection. The male has already chosen the one to come, and when the song conjures her up like a spirit answering a spell, he is already hers. But the singing doesn't stop there, or even after the eggs are laid and hatched. The males keep singing, and perhaps they consider themselves to be singing for some other reason, but to her, her father's song cinched her in place every bit as much as did the nest and the brooding weight of her harried, easily flustered mother. That is, since the song she heard cinched her in place, she assumed it was her father's song, since it fulfilled a role for her that formed an essential complement to her mother's care. It was a father's song as far as she was concerned, whoever was doing the singing. But how could a song affect her so much, drawing her up toward life, like a sun draws heliotrope, if it didn't give her that male bird, and if she didn't have some of his makeup in herself? She never saw him, knowingly, which was not unusual. There were many possible fathers around, and she never heard any of them sing. On one occasion, she had heard the song she considered her father's, and quickly investigating, found all of the neighborhood songbirds flocked together in a tree, so many of them she couldn't tell if any of the possible fathers, or if all of them, were in it. It wasn't long before she forgot all about fathers and mothers, though, since it was on that occasion that she met her mate. The wind blows. The bow bobs up and down, with her riding on it. The wind smooths everything around. There's a salt ocean smell for a moment. A hieroglyph opens, and darts its lances and blanks into time. The phrases lengthen, and the pauses grow deeper. They stretch like membranes. Dread gaps that pounce and choke off aphoristic phrases whose completion comes as a surprise, an eager silence welling up. Calling with the splits between the trees and branches, above the rocks, the sound carries across the stream, tumored with a pool, scum-lidded and froth-spiraled. The phrases are twists and beams. Out come flashes of bright sound, pure tones from all songs, knocks and bangs from a haunting, the sighing and trilling of breath and air, the sound of snow falling, the sound clouds make when the gleaming magenta winks out and they turn blue, the nostalgic sound of the angles and curves recoiling from the mountains, their ominous stillness, their colors. Something alien in the tone drags these sounds. They all have a shattered quality. The sounds are like puzzle rock, which seems complete but disassembles into dust and shards under any pressure. The shape of the sound, which is nothing, not even a bubble, holds together its tones. This is accomplished by the relationship of the sounds and pauses to each other, so, just like puzzle rock, the mass altogether holds the internal shapes. "Did you hear it?" the plover asks her. "It was strange singing. I've just heard it now. Where is it? Did you hear it too?" "Do you hear it now?" No, not now. It was strange. In part, it was strange because it sounded like you." "Perhaps it was me. I was singing just a moment ago." "Females don't sing," the plover says. "You're female. Females don't sing." "I do sing. That was probably my voice you heard just now." "Demonstrate for me. I don't know what you mean." At this request, the songbird, although she is hoarse and exhausted from singing, resumes her song, listening, singing, turning her head, waiting, singing. But the plover doesn't seem to understand. "What? That? What was that? Was that what you heard?" "I'm not sure. Yes, well, a bit like it, but also not like it. It had a more far-away sound than before." "You were further away before." "Yes, well, but that isn't exactly it. I mean, not simply that it was far away from me, but that even as I came toward it, since I was, as it were, compelled to investigate such a bizarre noise, it kind of kept its distance and wouldn't exactly allow me to hear it directly, straight on. That was me, singing. Females don't sing, you know that. You're a female." "Yes, I know I'm female, but I have a voice anyway, so I may sing." "I thought you had a voice so that you could call, not sing." The plover raises its head as high as it will go, tilting its beak straight up toward the sky, evidently thinking. Then, as if it had only been stretching, it abruptly lowers its head. "I wasn't calling, I was singing," the songbird says. "It didn't sound much like singing to me." "You called it singing." "When?" "Just now." I must have been listening to something else," the plover says, coyly. "Anyway, there's nothing wrong with my singing if I want to." "I don't think you should. If I have a voice, shouldn't I sing?" "You might try a little singing now and then. I do that myself, to tell the truth. We all do. Although really, you should only use your voice to call, not sing. Males sing. You're female. But we do all sing, rarely, but not that way. I want to keep singing. I want to keep singing that way. Why that way? Because that's the way it comes out. It's barely singing at all. I wouldn't call it singing if I were you. Then perhaps I'm not singing, but making some other kind of song noise. If it's a song, then you're singing. Then I'm singing. You aren't calling either. No, it's more like answering. What are you answering? I don't know, but I wouldn't do it for no reason, so there must be a reason. The songbird is getting worked up, and now she is so tired she has to lean against the trunk of the tree. The ethics say that the highest good is to live in harmony with others. I agree, of course, the songbird says, a little impatiently, not so much with the conversation or with the plover as with her own fatigue, which seems to have permanently joined itself to her, becoming her primary characteristic. And you call that harmonious? I don't know, it may be. It is harmonious to recede from those who aren't harmonious themselves. I suppose, but the ethics say that the highest good is to live in harmony with others. I just said that. Are you falling asleep? No, if only I were, but the ethics says the highest good is to live in harmony with others. To live, you see. The plover resettles its 2 feet before it responds. I don't follow you. I can't seem to live without it, without singing. I mean, trying to sing. Why not? Songbird. Female songbird. Females don't sing, but they do live. What happened to your eye? A fire. A fire? More than astonishment, this explanation seems to make the plover almost indignant. Yet the shocking mental impression of the moment, the vivid presentiment of agony, the irredeemable loss of an eye, stymies the plover. Its gaze hovers somewhere about the songbird's feet, fixed and unblinking, its beak opening slightly, then closing again. Fire! It says at last, unable to accept the idea that the songbird, after having been blinded in a fire, is able to conduct an ordinary conversation. You are singing, trying to sing, the plover corrects itself, because the fire burned you. As the songbird appears to think this over, the cuckoo's voice suddenly resounds in the air, swelling from the thickest part of the woods. The songbird dwindles. The plover cocks its head to listen. The call has its own shadow of quiet. Creepy, these woods, the plover says. The cuckoo has a sly, contemptuous expressionlessness in its face. Behind it, there are sprawling, massive, naked chicks with dull red bodies and eyes like smooth black pebbles, covered in goose pimples, ungainly, wallowing in a stranger's nest, the forest floor below littered with the remains of the other chicks. The cuckoo's call is a mocking riddle, mercilessly repeated in gentle tones. How do you know you're young? Your own. There is something about the cry of her one remaining chick that grates on her, a hacking noise at the back of the throat that lends an air of angry impatience to its shrieking for food. This chick is now so large it is nearly threatening, larger than the songbird herself, but its impotence only swells on all the food she wearily drags back to the nest. When she feeds it, its gaping mouth nearly engulfs her whole head. Her face is entirely within its convulsing throat. She searches her memory, unable to recall whether or not she has ever had any chicks before. It seems to her she has. But this vague impression is all that arises in response to her summons. Perhaps those were dreams, and this is the first time? She is certain that it isn't, but it's a certainty she can't account for in any other way. The songbird perches on a branch with her one good eye on the nest. Inside it, she can hear the chick heave itself into a new position, trying to find the most comfortable posture for screaming. Those screams will send her darting off into space once more. She can't help it. The song of every mood, and also the nature of the external body singing. If the body is affected in a manner which involves the nature of any external body, the mind will regard that external body as actually existing until the mind be affected in such a way as to exclude the existence or the presence of the said external body. If the body has once been affected by two or more bodies at once, then, when the singer afterwards sings any of them, it will straightway remember the others also. The song in the mind is also in scintillation, following in scintillation in the same manner, and being referred to scintillation in the same manner as the song of the body. The singer does not know itself except insofar as it perceives that the modifications of the body are modifications of the song. The knowledge of the never-ending echo of scintillation, which is the burden of every song, is adequate and perfect. The singer is determined to wish this or that by a cause, which has also been determined by another cause, and by this last another cause, and so never-endingly on. The chick's head wobbles feebly up over the edge of the nest. Its eyes are black, greasy slits, thinly filmed over with transparent flesh. The edges of the beaked mouth part, spread wide, and from the depths of its hollow insides, raw and pulpy as sundered fruit, comes a rasping, penetrating scream of hunger that is repeated over and over again like an insult, straight up into the air. At the sound, the songbird flits away through the trees, her aching joints grinding against each other, the air forced in and out of her lungs violently by her almost panicked wing beats, straining her one remaining eye to probe the darkness for more food, the dartings and seethings of more food. When next she can rest, when her massive chick has fallen asleep, lying limp on its face like a corpse, its ragged red mouth still a little agape, the songbird can only sleep uncertainly herself. Expecting the imperious command for more food, at any moment she is jolted awake by the least noise. She seems already to hear her chick's voice, screeching. There is something wrong with that sound, she thinks, but without being able to determine what it is. She believes the sound ought to remind her of something, but her chick is totally unfamiliar in both sound and appearance. There is nothing at all that surprising or interesting in that, she thinks. Why should I assume that every chick will be the same? Why should a chick resemble either of its parents? That thought strikes her insides with a sensation of intense cold. Why should that thought be so startling? Why does it feel this dangerous to think like that? When next her chick cries, she will immediately bestir herself to feed it no matter what. But what could induce her to do differently? Why should that be something she would need to tell herself she will do? The thoughts waver in and out like heavy flies, clumsy, loud, slow, swinging through space waiting for some reason to land, or sitting in place, stupefied, then streak away, no reason. Round and round, searching, but for nothing. Mindlessly roaming, stupid, back and forth, stop, go. It scrapes its eyes, then sits in a daze, then scrapes its unseeing eyes again. Airborne dirt clods trailing crumbs of curdled soil and saliva, and buzzing with the sleepy noise of idiocy as they bump against trees and stones. Flick one out of mid-air and ram it down a screaming jelly-red throat like a packet of silence that a bottomless hunger will dissolve entirely in a moment or two. Collect stupidities one by one, drag them heavily back to the nest, stuff them in a swollen, raging stomach, this chick of hers, now horrid with its first feathers. Soon it will leave, she reassures herself, and she will be free of it at last. It will never leave, she thinks in despair, and the idea makes her want to crumble. Her injuries, her slowly healing bones, her aching muscles and sore feet, the fatigue that makes her more dead than alive, all loom up suddenly like idols of clear ice in the darkness, and demand she make herself nothing more than them. Stuff the chick with flies, black, oily and stinking, buzzing with fury, stuff the bugs down the gullet, jelly red, call out to the mate you now know is dead, stagger, fly, hunt, return, in sleep and in waking the same, feed it the same, but never the other, never any other, not like any other this one, so much larger, so much louder, so much more hideous, so greedy and sullen, face at rest like a monster, too tired to complain for the moment, and not like the other, never the others, not there, not even a little, not herself, not her mate, flew away into a huge, thick-gutted monster that overflows the nest, and can barely raise its massive head, except to shriek deafeningly for food, 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 stuff me with black foulness, stuff your aching half-broken head down my throat. Nothing can be destroyed, except by a cause external to itself. The chick emerges from the egg. Things cannot coexist in the same larger thing, insofar as one is capable of destroying the other, and the egg from the mother, and now the mother, is going to vanish down the throat of the chick. The singer sings those things which increase or help the power of activity in the body, booming with screams, like a hollow log, but not the other, no, hers, the monster, hers, fly, stare, peck the fly from the air. When the singer sings things which diminish or hinder the body's power of activity, it endeavors, as far as possible, to remember things which exclude the existence of those hindering things. Bring it back and give it to it, her chick, hers. Hence, it follows that the singer shrinks from conceiving those things which diminish or constrain the power of itself and of the body, so much larger than she is, than her mate ever was, than any of their kind, so-called, ever were, but hers, a freak, must be, hers, hers! What happened? She was flying, yes, she fell somehow, not knowing how, nor ever knowing how, the sickening crack of her head on the ground, and the ensuing gusher of pain, the fire! She burned, she was blinded in her right eye, searing, agony, the fire somehow stops, she's trapped, but sees the thermals, rises on them, is flung clear. All this was, it has happened, it is not happening now, it's over, entirely over. She returned to that surviving chick, hers, her surviving chick. Dusk, to her, is the moment when all the world's colors invert, their daylight luster giving way to an ember-like, nocturnal fluorescence. Green becomes black, yellow is silver, blue is invisible, orange amethyst, and red deepens to a sulphurous brown. Movements at night are swathes of smeared outlines, like stains that glimmer back into the shade gradually. The purring of crickets and the flounce of wind through the bracken is probed, now and then, by the smothered hooting of an eagle owl that once struck the songbird as both menacing and sorrowful, like a sobbed threat. Now, when she hears the eagle owl, she has the insane impulse to answer it. She might see it coming, but she would hear nothing. The owl's call means the owl is present, but not hunting. The owl's silent presence is the real danger. Tonight she notices the straining way the owl hoots. It must have to push hard to get its throat to create that sound, so unlike her own voice, which bounds out of her almost of its own accord, each distinct sound leaping aloft like a grasshopper. The owl doesn't raise its head and project its call. It puffs itself up on its perch and squeezes the noise out with the same expression of impersonal ferocity that it always wears, as if it were self-conscious and a little embarrassed. The owl is not terrible when it calls, but only when that fierce face looms up out of the darkness in perfect silence, the eyes suffused with perfect concentration and expanding like the sky. She wants to call to it, but it will stop hooting and start hunting soon anyway, and although that is a threat to her life, the songbird sees in her mind the owl standing over a limp form of the cuckoo, tearing at it through its feathers and bolting down shreds of its meat, pausing to glance confidently around before ripping another piece of flesh free, and the vision is so bitterly satisfying that it somehow leavens her fear and awakens a feeling of anger as savage and yet remote as the violence of a distant storm. Although her whole body is limp with fatigue, that chaotic feeling throws her into the air again. She flies from branch to branch, her body throbs with her breathing, going to the owl. Swimming wildly into the night, she plows right into smoke-thickened air. Amber flickers up, brilliant in a black cage of brambles off to her right. Without a thought, she aims for it. Human voices bring her up short, and she stops abruptly, alighting on a high bough overlooking the small clearing. 3 gargantuas are moving in inexplicable ways around the fire, which erupts in a small but fierce blaze hemmed in by stones. One of the giants prods it with a stick. Bright motes wriggle up from the flames and twist away, half hidden in the foul belt of smoke that scrabbles into the treetops. What is this a sign of? Fire is not a thing like a stone or a tree. It's more like wind, streamingness, but the fire is more like a tree than the wind in that it has a shape, perhaps like the shape of a tree tossed by the wind, not as constant as a rock, but not shapeless, like a wind. Like a rock, it doesn't divide but doubles. A split rock becomes 2 rocks, a split fire becomes 2 fires, but the fire will grow, and the rock can only shrink. Rocks don't vanish altogether out of sight, and neither do trees. A fire can wink out of existence, and it can spring up fully formed out of nothing. It grows and moves and eats like a living thing, but crazy, so much faster, and living things don't give off light, and aren't conjured from nothing and into nothing, with no bones, no skin, no face. It's like life running away with itself, forgetting all about shape, with no predators or limits. But what life is destroyed by water? What life leaves no corpse? The fungal infection makes her burned-out eye socket look as if it were half pocked with cotton wool. The wind tugs at its fibers. A spark catches in a projecting white tuft. It blackens, and a thin streak of smoke etches the air past the songbird's head. Then the wind extinguishes the spark. The songbird is oblivious. Fleeting warmth is all she felt. Staring into the brightening depths of the fire, she somehow misses and sees through the fire. Her vision blurs. The world recedes. It's like looking up at the world from beneath a water's surface, wanting to know where the blue sky crashes against the landscape like the ocean. The sky crashes against itself and in itself, light on light, and blue on blue. This is a sign. It means your chicks are dead. They are all dead.